Um, Thank you. Welcome to week 9 of the Friday Transportation Seminar. My name is Miguel Figliozzi, and faculty in civil engineering, and with my colleague Jenny Liu from planning, we organized the seminar this term. It's week 9, so welcome to the people that made it here and to the people online. And today we have a guest from the University of Minnesota, Alireza Kani, that will be talking about OD estimation methods using one-tap pavement systems. So something that we have recently, adopted in Portland too. So looking forward to listening to Alireza's presentation. So.
Thank you, Miguel. Good afternoon. I'm happy to be here. Thank you for the invitation. I'm Alireza Kani. I'm an assistant professor in the Department of Civil, Environmental, and Geoengineering at the University of Minnesota. And my work is primarily on transit system modeling and data analysis. For this presentation, I selected something more on the practical side to address some existing problems by the transit agencies. And the topic is on using automatically collected transit data for demand analysis and clustering or classification of transit users. So we all know that transit demand is a crucial piece of transportation modeling and engineering. So in transit assignment for ridership forecasting, we need transit demand. It's a primary input to the transit assignment. And also we need the route choice model that is another aspect of transit demand. So we all need to have this demand data for modeling, for service planning, and calculating the frequency or headway of routes to address the demand. We need to have a good estimate about the transit demand first. So transit demand is traditionally prepared by onboard survey data. So transit agencies collect or interview people on the buses and trains and ask their origins, destinations, the routes that they take, etc. But there are some issues with the onboard survey data. They are usually in a small sample sizes, typically 20,000, 30,000 people are interviewed every few years, typically 5 years, maybe 10 years, sometimes 2-3 years. And the reason is that it's expensive to collect this data very often. Besides that, interviews could be subject to errors because of the human aspects of collecting the data. An alternative to onboard survey data is automated transit data or automatically collected transit data, which are available in large sample size and in high resolution, highly detailed data format. They may be more reliable in terms of the measurement because there is no human error involved in the collection process. And they may be available, and they are actually available every day as a byproduct to the transit operation and transit fare collection. However, in order to use the automatically collected transit data, we need to have new methods and tools in order to process the data and make inference from the data. And one limitation of automatically collected transit data is that there is no user information in the data. So we don't have information about users' socio-demographic characteristics. We just know the behavior of these users through the information that is collected from them. So with that introduction on transit demand, I'm going to further explain automatically collected transit data, what we are talking about specifically. And then I will present some studies using the data on demand analysis. In particular, I will present some descriptive analysis of transit data. Transit demand. And I'll present some origin destination estimation using transit data and the user classification using the trip chaining results. Then I will conclude with some conclusions and future work. So when we say automatically collect the transit data, we primarily refer to at least 3 types of the data. First, automatically or automatic vehicle location data, which is basically the GPS points reported from buses every few seconds. Typically, every 30 seconds, in high resolution, it could be up to every 5 seconds. Very high level, high resolution data, good for performance analysis of the routes, and also for speed and delay analysis to pinpoint where exactly the delay happens on a route and find the causes of the delay at different segments of the route. It also is useful for measuring the reliability of the routes, especially at transfer points where 2 buses or 2 transit routes intersect. If one of them is a little bit late, people may miss the transfer, etc. AVL data can be used for this type of analysis. The second type of the data is transit automatic passenger count, or APC data, which is basically the number of people getting on and off buses and trains at every stop for every vehicle. And this is probably the most common automated transit data used in practice for ridership analysis, for demand estimation, and also for validating and calibrating demand forecasting models. One limitation of the APC data is that it's just about the number of people getting on and off. There is no linkage between the origin and destination of individuals, and actually there is no information about the individuals. And if, for example, someone makes a transfer, that person may be counted 2 times, but we don't have any information to connect these 2 rides for that same passenger. The third type of the data is automatic fare collection, or AFC data, which is basically the smart card tag information. Every time users use their transit pass to get on a bus, they tap the card, the information about the time, location, the route number, etc. is recorded in a database. And this is available in an individual basis. So we can basically track those people, see how they travel during the day. This is a great source of data for ridership analysis, again, if there is a good sample size or good penetration of using smart cards. Great for demand estimation, origin destination demand estimation, and also user behavior modeling. Again, another limitation of the AFC data is that there is no information about user characteristics. The only thing which is available is probably a card number, which is linked to the user profile, but there's no access to the user profile. So I'm going to talk about the AFC data in this presentation and present how we can use this AFC data for demand analysis. So the study here is focused on the University of Minnesota student passes, which is a subset of the AFC data in the Twin Cities, Minneapolis, St. Paul area in Minnesota. So what is a U-Pass? So the University of Minnesota provides the transit option for student riders in the form of a smart card or a transit pass called U-Pass. Students can purchase the card for $100 per semester, and they can use it for unlimited rides in the entire Metro Transit system, including buses, express buses, LRT lines, BRTs, and 1 commuter rail. Metro Transit realized or noticed that since 2009 until 2015, there was a decline in the number of times that people use those passes on their transit system. So basically, the frequency of the tags declined continuously since 2009. And they asked us to do an analysis on the demand pattern of student users to see how they change over time in the last 6-7 years, and also to cluster student riders to different groups and to different geographic locations. The results and findings from this study would be used for developing marketing strategies to promote the UPass and transit service to student population toward increasing the ridership. So similar to what I mentioned, UPass data contains the card ID of the users and the tag time location in the form of latitude and longitude, and the route number for each tag, and also an indicator for transfer, whether the tag is a transfer or it's a start of a trip. And this indicator is based on a 2.5-hour free transfer policy. So this may not be necessarily a reliable indication of transfer, but this is what is available from the data. So the tag records are available in a database, but no origin destination or no path is available for the travelers. So at the beginning, we did some descriptive analysis of the data, just to show you how the data can provide different dimensions of transit demand. So this graph shows how the tag frequency, or let me call it ridership, declined since 2009 from about 6 million tags per year up to near 4.5 million tags per year. And this is about 23% decline. But if you look at the number of unique cards used by transit in each year, the decline is not as significant. And actually, in the last year, there was an increase of about 8% in the number of cards being used in the system. So the third graph here shows the average tag per card. So maybe people still own the card, they use it, but less frequently. And this is correct because you're seeing a 28% decrease comparing the first year and last year of the data. But we need to get deeper into the demand analysis. The AFC data can be used for different types of analysis. So on this graph, these are just samples. I'm showing the ridership by day, by month, etc. So the upper left graph shows the ridership per day, and of course we are seeing smaller ridership values on weekends. Then the number of cards per day, a number of rides per card by day is also shown, and it shows that people who use transit regularly, they use it for weekend trips also. So they primarily rely on transit. Ridership by month in the lower left graph shows that, of course, 3 months of summer have low ridership. And the first month, this is January, because the semester starts halfway through the January, we are seeing less ridership than other months. We are seeing the highest ridership in October, which is a full month, maybe because of the weather condition, which is getting a little bit cold in Minnesota. People use transit more frequently. And also the number of cards used by each month. And we are seeing pretty flat pattern during the semester month and low numbers for summer month. So the next type of analysis is a time series analysis. So we have this monthly ridership over 6 years, and it has a lot of fluctuations. And we decompose these numbers, or these ridership numbers, to 3 terms. The trend, excluding the seasonal variations and any randomness, that shows a certain decline in the ridership. A seasonal variation, which is pretty the same or similar on different years, and some random variations due to other reasons. And this gives us a better idea of how the trend has been for the ridership. Looking at the monthly unique cards being used in the last 6 years, we did a similar analysis, but this time for the trend, we are seeing a decline up until 2014. And after that, the number of cars is picking up. So we are seeing an increase after that for the number of cars being used. Just as a piece of information, Metro Transit opened a new LRT line called Metro Green Line, which has been a very successful project, and it connects downtown Minneapolis to downtown St. Paul, and it actually goes through the university campus. And many students and faculty staff use the system for commute or other trips. That route started in 2014, and we can attribute this increase to that opening of the route. So there are some preliminary findings so far. So the UPass ridership does have a decreasing trend, but the number of cars being used has been picking up since 2014. And also the seasonal variation shows that ridership goes somehow down during the semester month. So in September and October, there's higher ridership, but in November and December, ridership is a little bit lower. Maybe people buy the passes, they rely on transit when they go to school at the beginning of the academic year, but later on they find other options or their travel pattern changes, and they use transit less frequently. So the second type of analysis that we did was an origin destination estimation using a trip chaining algorithm. What is a trip chaining algorithm? So we have these tag locations and time for each individual shown by these stars here, and there is a sequence of these tags. So the trip chaining algorithm processes these information to find the to change the trips for that individual and find the origins and destination. So basically, we find the path for that person going from each point to the next point, and also we find the origin location and the destinations of that person during the day. There are many algorithms for trip chaining in the literature. Most of them are pretty much the same. They process the tag sequentially. They start with the first tag of the day. They find the nearest stop to the tag and assume it's the boarding stop. And then they find the nearest vehicle trip or nearest schedule to the tag time and assume that that's the vehicle that the passenger has taken. Then they find the boarding time. The next step is to find the alighting station, which is the nearest station or stop to the next tag location, and the alighting time can be inferred. And this continues on the second tag, the boarding stop, boarding time, alighting stop, and alighting time, and so on and so forth up until the last tag of the day. For the last tag of the day, the assumption is that people go back to the first tag location of the day. They go back home, basically. And another assumption is that there's no other mode of transportation used by those individuals during the day. So all the trips are made by transit. This algorithm works great, but it might fail at some cases. It may have some issues. I have listed some of the issues here. So the first potential issue is an incorrect boarding stop inference due to a GPS error. If the tag location has a GPS error, then the nearest stop may not be the correct stop. And then if the stop is not correct, then the vehicle trips that they have taken may be wrongly inferred. And this is also possibly due to the schedule delay. So if we find the nearest schedule to the tag time, if the bus actually was late or early, that inference could be subject to some error. And if the trip is wrongly inferred, then the alighting stop may be wrongly inferred also. I'm showing an example here that someone took Route 2 from Kaufman Union Stop going to the intersection of Hennepin Avenue and 8th Street, where the next tag location is. In this case, Route 2 has two variations, 2A and 2C. If Route 2A is inferred as the trip of that person, the the nearest stop to the next tag location is TCF Bank Stadium, which is far from that location. So in this case, the algorithm may infer a wrong location, or if this distance is beyond the threshold, it may report it as no inference. However, the actual trip taken by this passenger is route 2C that goes all the way to the to route 10 where the next tag happened. So we try to avoid this situation by proposing a new algorithm based on the likelihood of the trajectory of passengers. So in this case, instead of sequentially processing the tag for a person, we create a set of possible trajectories or possible combination of boarding a stop, trip, and alighting a stop for that individual. And we find a combined probability for each trajectory, and we select the one which is highly likely, the one with the highest likelihood value. The likelihood or the probability value is a combination of three terms. P1 is the probability of boarding at each stop, and it's determined based on the distribution of GPS error. P2 is the probability of a vehicle trip taken by the passenger, and it's determined based on the distribution of bus delay at that stop. And P3 is the probability of an alighting station near to the next tag location, and that one is determined based on a route choice model taking into account the in-vehicle time and walking time. So after we calculate this probability, we select the trajectory which is most likely the actual trajectory of each passenger. We applied that method to the UPass data from March 7th to March 10th, 2016. In the initial data cleaning process, we removed something about 22% of the tags because they were not ready for the inference. Out of 85,000 tags, about near 10% are excluded because either no or bad geographical coordinate issues, information, I'm sorry. And also about 12.6% of the tags are a single tag for the user on that day. So we need at least 2 tags for each individual in order to chain the trips. Otherwise, we cannot infer anything with one single tag. So we had to remove these tags, even though they are OK tags. So out of these 66,000 remaining tags, we were able to infer 56,000 of the tags, if you look at the last row of this table, with the proposed algorithm, which compares to the baseline algorithm with 46,000 tags. So there's a 15% more tags being inferred with the proposed algorithm. And it is likely that most of these inferences are better inferences in terms of the quality. Something that I forgot to mention is that some of the routes are called pay-exit, which means that on these routes, usually express routes outbound from the campus or from the city center in the evening, people board on the bus without tapping their card, and they tap when they get to their destination and when they get off the bus. The baseline algorithm was not able to infer those tags, but the proposed algorithm is able to infer more than 4,000 out of 5,000 tags for pay-exit cases. So this table shows a significant improvement for the inference of the origins and destinations. Then we plotted the origin destinations for the UPass riders. The origin map shows that most of the origins are located either along the Metro Green Line. There's the series of these red circles. This is the Metro Green Line corridor that connects downtown Minneapolis to downtown St. Paul. And here is where the university campus is located. A lot of tags start in the northern and western part of the campus, and this is where most of the students live. Some tags start from the downtown Minneapolis and uptown Minneapolis, a dense residential area that some students live. And if you look at the destinations, Most of them are clustered around the university campus or on the university campus. However, we are seeing a significant number of people going to either downtowns or to uptown, possibly for other trip purposes. I'm showing the result in a different way. We can look at the trips on each route, which is not readily available from APC data. As I said, APC data shows only the number of boardings and number of alightings, while there is no connection between the boardings and alightings. But here we can have the trips going from each stop to the next stop on the route. These graphs are on a metro green line and showing that, say, for example, a lot of trips start from Hennepin station going to the East Bank station. This East Bank is where the university campus is located, and you're seeing a huge number of trips going to the university campus, the blue color, both in the eastbound direction and westbound direction. So this information is very important for transit planners because they want to know where trips start and end and how long are the trips, etc. The third part of the analysis is user classification using the results of the trip chaining algorithm. So in this case, we want to know how the behavior and the distribution of travel demand is in the Twin Cities region. So we use two types of clustering. The first type of clustering is a spatial clustering or user classification that represents the changes in students' origin or their home location. So we created the clustering over different years in the last 6 or 7 years, and we observed how they change over time. We use the DB scan algorithm, the distance space, spatial clustering, and I don't remember the A and N here, but it's a spatial clustering algorithm. The good thing about the DB scan algorithm is that it does not require a fixed number of clusters, so we can apply it and it will give us how many clusters exist. However, it needs the two parameters. One is the radius for each cluster, the distance or the spatial radius of each cluster, and also the minimum number of members in order to define a new cluster. So if there is not many members belonging to a cluster, that cluster may not be actually a cluster. It may be a noise. Just few users use or start the trip from that location. So applying the DB scan algorithm, we got the results, the spatial clustering. I'm showing some sample results from February 2009, February 2012, and February 2016. And these are the origin location of the trips. And by comparing these three maps, we are seeing that in 2009, there are some big clusters with a high number of people in each cluster. The big one is around the university campus. The next one is downtown Minneapolis, and another one is in uptown. Moving to 2012, the size of the clusters became smaller a little bit, and of course the shape changes because the travel demand pattern changes. And in 2016, there are even smaller clusters. So we are seeing these changes in the origin patterns of the users. One hypothesis is that because there have been a lot of residential housing development on campus and around campus, perhaps more students are living on campus and near campus, and they're using their other transportation modes. For example, they probably bike or walk to campus, or they use the university shuttle routes, which are free. The second clustering or user classification is the behavioral classification. And for this, we use multiple days of trip chaining results to see how regular the student riders are in using transit. We particularly looked at 5 different factors. the number of days that each person uses transit out of the study period, the number of trips per day for those riders, and the frequency of using the same travel pattern in terms of the similar boarding stops, similar routes, and similar departure time. So if, for example, a person takes the same route at the same stop at the same time and goes to the destination every 5 weekdays, that person should be a very regular transit rider. But if they use transit at different times and locations, somehow infrequently during the week, that person may not be a regular transit user. So we use the k-means algorithm to determine the high regular, low regular, and mid regular users. Here's the results in a very aggregate way. On the upper left graph, we are showing the share or the percentage of users in each cluster over time. The darker red line shows the high regular users, and you're seeing an increase in the percentage of users who are high regular, and we're seeing a decline in the percentage of users who are low regular. We know that the number of users is probably declining. So this doesn't mean that there are more regular users or there are more high regular users. It may be that there are fewer low regular users, and therefore the share of high regular users become larger in the population. In terms of the number of days travel for each cluster, we are seeing a little bit fluctuation. So from 2009, all the values increased to 2011, then they decreased to 2013. And after 2013 and 14, the number of days traveled in the high regular group has increased. Again, we can attribute this to the construction period before 2014, the construction of the Metro Green Line that impacted the transit service. And then after that, the transit service improved by Metro Green Line, and there are more regular users among students. But the most interesting finding is here is on the number of trips per day and the number of similar departure times, and I also have the number of similar routes and stops. I'm not showing them here because they're very similar. We are seeing a significant spike here in 2014, and it shows that people just use transit more, or they became more regular in 2014, maybe because they're excited by the new interesting transit mode, they started to use it, and after that, demand becomes stable somehow and converges to something. So these are really interesting findings from the planning perspective for Metro Transit planners. Again, if I want to summarize the findings from the trip chaining and user classifications, the first finding is that the student riders became especially less clustered by time over the past few years. This is likely because there's more housing options on campus, around campus, and students are moving closer to the campus, and they're biking, walking, and using university shuttles to go to campus. Student riders became more regular in general. Again, it may be that the high regular riders kept using transit in the past few years, but low regular riders dropped out. They have switched to other locations or other modes of transportation, etc. And last but not least, we observed significant changes in travel pattern in 2014 when the Metro Green Line opened. So how can these findings be used? So Metro Transit is interested in using some of the findings from these results, this study, for their marketing strategies to develop promotional programs to attract more students to transit system. They could potentially use the results for developing different fare structure for transit passes, and also define a better price for the U-Pass system. And very importantly, by knowing the spatial and behavioral and temporal distribution of transit demand, transit planners can go ahead and develop a service, a new service, or adjust the existing service to address the actual demand to the locations and times where the highest demand is available. So in terms of the future work, there are so many interesting things can be done with the AFC data. So the trip chaining algorithm could be improved in different ways. For example, by using the AVL data, the actual arrival of the buses to the station, rather than by comparing the tag time with the schedule, we can compare the tag time with the actual arrival time of the buses to the station. The extension of the trip chaining to the system-wide AFC data for the whole metro area is likely one of the next steps in this study. And therefore, we can possibly estimate an OD demand matrix for the whole region. The difficulty here is that even though there is a good penetration of smart cards, something about 60 or 70% of users use the smart cards. First of all, the inference rate is something about 2 out of 3, so we can infer 2 out of 3 tags correctly. But there may be a bias in the population of riders with a smart card and without a smart card. Those people who pay cash to ride transit may have a totally different travel behavior. So the expansion from the demand, a smart card demand, to the whole demand is a challenge. Of course, different attributes and different clustering methods can be used to analyze the demand. And very importantly, different user behavior characteristics can be developed using the smart card results and trip chaining results, including the route choice model, the stop choice, and departure time choice, etc. This is about my presentation. I'd like to acknowledge National Science Foundation that supported some of our research on transit data, and also the College of Science and Engineering at the University of Minnesota, as well as the Department of Civil, Environmental, and Geoengineering, that they both supported research in the transit research group. And of course, I should thank Metro Transit for sharing the data and for the very insightful feedback throughout this study. Most of the work has been done by Pramesh Kumar, my PhD student, who did a fantastic job analyzing the data and developing tools for visualization of the results. And also I should thank my research group, the members of the transit lab at the University of Minnesota. With that, I can finish my presentation and happy to take questions.
Since such a deviation was created by the addition of the green line, do you look at any sort of options to exclude that or consider that in this study and flatten things out?
I'm trying to understand the question. So you're referring to the service options that's due?
Well, so with you said in 2014 with the addition of the green line, you had a large spike in individual riders who used the system, and then it also kind of created a different option for where people were taking trips to and from. Did you look at excluding any of that information or trying to find some methodology that would allow you to basically eliminate the impact of the green line to see what overall trends in ridership were, rather than ones that were just affected specifically by that line?
Yeah, that's a good question. So maybe I can elaborate on that result a little bit. Back. So we try to observe the behavior of the users in terms of what routes they take, etc. And what I'm showing here is the actual start and end of the trips. For example, a lot of trips go from this green area, stadium where students live. They go to East Bank where the university campus is. And we are interested in knowing how many people go from this stop to this stop. And this may be part of a tour that a person makes during the day. So this is one leg of the many trips that they make. I don't think we can easily remove this part and process other parts of the tour or the other trips, but there could be ways that we could possibly isolate the effect of the green line on the demand changes. We have not done that yet, but I see that as an option for future. Yes?
You talked about your method for excluding certain trips that you deemed had a GPS error. So were you able to pinpoint the specific trips that did have a GPS error, or did you just apply a 10% random selection of trips to exclude?
Oh, for the, I guess this one, right?
Yep.
So we excluded some of the tags because they had GPS, significant GPS errors. For example, they had lat long information outside the metro area. So for example, we had some tags in Chicago. So this is certainly a GPS error. So we excluded those, any tag which was outside the service area of the transit system. And for some of the routes, possibly because they are operated by different operators, there was no lat long information available. So we did not necessarily process the GPS data. We just excluded those tags which are obviously, not useful. Anything in addition to that was automatically excluded in the trip chain. So we have, so out of 66,000 tags, we were able to infer 56,000 tags. Among these 10% missing tags, many of them may be due to GPS error. We did not look into the details of that. Yes?
Since we're talking about excluded tags, the single tags, is that just when the user maybe take the bus to school and then get a ride home with a friend afterwards?
Exactly.
Okay. Well, I'm curious, do those buses have bike racks on them?
Yes. Yes, most of them they did. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. It is. So one of the assumptions of trip chaining, I kind of alluded to that, but I didn't elaborate on that. Is that during the day, users use only transit. There is no other mode. And this is an assumption. We assume that people start the trip from the origin or home, they use transit to go visit the destination, and then they come back. So they use only transit. If they use any other modes, for example, they pick up a bike from a bike share station, or they take Uber, etc., to go visit the next point, the algorithm will not be able to infer the complete chain of the trips for that person. So again, among these 10% failure or 10,000 uninferred tags, many of them could be the violation of this assumption. Thanks.
So one question about the data. So if a student starts as a freshman, gets a car, then renews the sophomore year until they're seniors and so on, do they keep the same number? Is the car associated with the student?
Yeah, that was an excellent question, and it was indeed brought up in communication with Metro Transit people. So as long as they don't lose the card, they just renew it, and the card ID will be the same. So we will be able to track people's behavior over multiple semesters. But if they return the card for one semester, and then maybe a year later they request another card. I believe they try to give the same number or assign the same number to that person. But if they lose the card, etc., the card number may be different. So to give a short answer, in general, the card IDs are the same for the same person over a different semester, unless something happens.
Yeah, so based on that, maybe it could be interesting that, after you just get the subset of people that keep the card for some time, over some years, to see what their user experience change. Because in a way, if you can see how people are kind of moving around in a way that some people maybe when they just arrive at the freshman, they just have a location, but then as they become familiar with the city, maybe they move to other neighborhoods. So I think for the university or the transit agency, may be useful to kind of know more about location choices throughout their university life. And I wonder if that kind of following, kind of more individuals can also say something about usage and versus how usage is changing as people move and they have to make more transfers or have longer travel times and so on. Maybe that in the future we think, maybe something that may be useful.
Yes, exactly. That would be really interesting, feature study. So we need to make sure that we have a subset of the users who use the same card. So we could possibly see what card IDs are present in the data for multiple semesters. But for those people who whose card ID changed, I'm not sure if we are able to find out what card ID is the same for the person. Because we don't have any information beside the card ID. We don't have any information about the name, address, etc. But yeah, certainly doable for those people who keep using transit for several semesters. Thanks.
So is there any data on like how many users there are who are not taking their cards? Like how many like free riders basically? How many people actually riding the transit and are not being tracked by the system?
That's an excellent point because so the okay. In general, when users ride the bus and train, they have to use their card. But there are 3 stations within the university campus that provide free ride for students, faculty, and actually Metro Transit provides free rides among these 3 stations on campus for faculty, staff, and students through a different program. But most of the students and even faculty staff, they perceive it as free ride and they don't use their card. So for the campus stations, it is very likely that we have an underestimation of the number of trips because students just go to the station, they get on the train, they don't have their card. So yeah, that's a known issue, and we have to somehow address that. I don't know if I answered the question.
But then you could use the APC data to match it.
Right, we could do that for the entire AFC population. This data is only for the students, but yes, certainly that's an option. Yes.
Thank you for the presentation. I'm from Japan, and I'd like to know whether it is easy to access these data or not. In Japan, most of these data are owned by its operators. In Japan, most of them are private companies. So if they agree, they can provide this data for academic use. How about in US? Is it easy to access it?
The short answer is no, because the data is considered as private data, and the private data is protected by law, by state law, and it was not easy to access to the data. And according to Metro Transit's policies, they can share the data with researchers only if it's toward answering their own question. So we cannot go and ask any transit agency to give us the data to do the research. They should have a research question. They give us the data to do the analysis, answer their question, and after that, we have to return the data. We cannot keep the data for future. But that's an excellent point.
For the behavioral user classification, could you map the data by frequency and see whether that correlates with service levels based on frequency of service or spam, beacon service?
Yes, the answer is yes. And actually, I had some results for the combination of the spatial clustering and behavioral clustering to see in which locations we have more regular users, in which locations we have more low regular users. Unfortunately, because of the time limit, I did not include that in the presentation. I'm happy to share it with you if you're interested. And similar to that combination, I guess we could map it to the routes to see which routes have the highest regular users and infrequent users. Thanks for the question.
Right. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.